Stand by as I bring in our senior White House correspondent, Kelly O'Donnell. Kelly, as Keir had noted, we've been expecting something like this. Any signals, though, coming out of the White House today, or has it been business as usual by appearances?
Well, we certainly had an expectation that this was a window of timing when this multi-tiered campaign of response could begin. Right now, the president is at his residence in Wilmington, Delaware, where he has a full skiff, a secure compartment in his home where he can have direct communications with the Pentagon and with any apparatus of the U.S. government. So he has full communications. He was in Delaware today in part because of the dignified transfer that is, of course, the impetus for this whole new operation. The lives of 3 Americans, soldiers based in Georgia who were taken in that drone strike, a few dozen other Americans also injured at that time, and the decision made to ramp up response. There has been an ongoing campaign of allied forces, the U.S. and the U.K. and others, who have been attacking Houthi targets in the region, trying to prevent any interruption of commerce and those things. So there's been a lot of military activity in the region, but this is distinctly different. A U.S. alone planned operation. The president had said he'd been briefed on a number of options and he had made a decision. And then we learned from senior officials that there would be an opportunity to consider a range of topics. And in these kinds of situations, assessing different types of targets in multiple countries, assets that could be on the ground, on the water, or in the cyber realm, all potential things that could be within the president's field of choice. Some of that comes from when the president makes a decision, and then some of it is executed at a military level where the president does not have to weigh in on each iteration of the operation. So what phase we're in right now, of course, this is the early going. What we don't know is if there have been less visible pieces of this kind of response, meaning the cyber realm, as well as, of course, the more obvious military targets. We will expect that the White House will comment at some point. So far, they're deferring to the Department of Defense. Lester?
Yeah, and on that, just to clarify, is there any expectation the president himself would come out?
We always are poised for that. I would expect a paper statement would be more likely at this point, and then at a later point when there's an assessment of how the operations have gone, a sense of perhaps is this a midpoint, a conclusion. Hard to know where we are other than we're at the beginning of this specific response. It is entirely possible the president would want to articulate this more. He has said he holds Iran indirectly responsible, but also has been careful to say he's not seeking a wider war, and the actions that he's taking are intended to show strength but restraint, to not prompt something that could go and expand this beyond where the president is prepared for. But he wants to send a message with what's underway right now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.